My brother, Kevin, not his real name, I'm trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately, and maybe being out in the world could help him get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout, turned Eagle Scout, turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia, where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking him if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to the trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether. And from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time.
It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities. We gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they would put a notice out to the ridge runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kev was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through. Just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of communication with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption like, "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheeks and jaw. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shoes looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he had smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom." That was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower, but something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breathe. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all, really, but all I got were grunts and a huzz before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more of the same. Kev eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then, it was stilted, awkward, unnatural.
He's been home for almost a month now, and something isn't right. His voice, it changed somehow? It's still his voice, but it's like there's a second voice buried underneath it. Like someone is trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all of this. Maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks. But after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away, and honestly, it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint, I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother, perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He widened his stance and thrashed his head towards the ground and out of my line of sight. I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure, so I ran out to check on him, and when I saw it, his head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for at least a day or so. Its body bloated and its eyes were dull and hazy. Kevin reached inside the cat's body and started to strip off pieces of muscle and tendon, slurping them up the same way he had been eating our mother's cooking. Pressing his thumb into the thing's skull, he popped out one of its eyes and tossed it back like a grape. I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals. Rabbits, mice, squirrels? I tried to run to my parents' room, to wake them up, to tell them that we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood. He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window, and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw, and my dad rushed outside to try and... Well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police, and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong, though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him, and I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was, killed my brother, and somehow his body came home. My brother disappeared, but I am terrified he will come back. My name is Celine. The title of this post is something I have whispered to myself for over a decade, but never dared to type out. People worry about your mental health when you talk about ghosts. They worry even more when you tell them you are living with one.
But I'm 36 now. I'm established. I'm stable. And I'm far enough away from the event to look at it clearly. I need to get this down because I looked at her this morning, really looked at her, and I realized the truth is undeniable. To understand what I have now, you have to understand what I lost. It started 15 years ago. I was 21, living in a cramped, drafty apartment in Montreal with the love of my life, Marianne. We were young, stupidly in love, and perpetually broke. Marianne was everything I wasn't. I was quiet, anxious, and prone to overthinking. Marianne was a firecracker. She was loud, she laughed with her whole chest, and she had the most piercing, impossible blue eyes I have ever seen on a human being. She was my anchor. Until the night I let her drive away angry. The argument was stupid. It's the cliché of every tragedy, isn't it? We fought over money. We were short on rent, and she had spent a little extra on concert tickets for my birthday. I should have been grateful. Instead, I yelled. I told her she was irresponsible. I told her she didn't take our future seriously. The last words I said to her were, "Just get out. I can't look at you right now." So, she did. She grabbed her keys, her eyes swimming with tears that made that blue look like a stormy ocean, and she slammed the door. 2 hours later, the police were knocking. Black ice on the highway. She had lost control of our beat-up Honda and went over the guardrail. She died on impact. The weeks following the funeral are a blur of gray. I don't remember eating. I don't remember sleeping, really. I just remember laying in our bed, staring at the empty spot beside me, smelling the fading scent of her vanilla shampoo on the pillowcase.
The guilt was a physical weight. It sat on my chest like an anvil. I had killed her. I convinced myself of that. If I hadn't yelled, if I hadn't kicked her out, she would be safe in bed. I was a murderer. That was when the activity started. At first, I welcomed it. It began small. I would come home from my waitressing job to find things displaced. A picture frame turned face down. The cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open. The temperature in the apartment would plummet, leaving my breath visible in the air despite the radiator clanking away at full blast. My grieving mind didn't register fear. It registered hope. "Marianne?" I would whisper into the darkness. "Is that you?" I assumed she was back. I assumed she wanted to tell me she was okay. But the atmosphere in the apartment wasn't comforting. It was heavy. It felt oppressive, like the air pressure before a tornado. 3 weeks after the funeral, the activity shifted from passive to aggressive. I was in the kitchen, making tea. I had the kettle on the stove. Suddenly, the burner dial snapped from low to high on its own. The gas flared up with a whoosh. I jumped back, my heart hammering. I reached out to turn it off, and a mug from the drying rack flew off the counter. It didn't just fall, it was thrown. It shattered against the wall inches from my head. I stood there, shards of ceramic at my feet, trembling. "Marianne," I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I thought it was her anger. I thought she was trapped here, furious at me for the way we left things. I deserved it, I told myself. If she wanted to throw things, let her. I deserved every bit of it. But it got worse. The nights became unbearable. I would wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy, wet breathing right next to my ear. Not the soft breath of a sleeping partner, but a raspy, guttural sound. When I reached for the lamp, the bulb would pop with a deafening crack, plunging me back into darkness. Shadows began to pool in the corners of the room, taller and darker than they should have been. They seemed to stretch toward the bed. I stopped sleeping. I became a ghost of myself. Dark circles under my eyes, shaking through my shifts at work. The culmination happened on a Tuesday in November. It was a month after the accident. I was lying in bed, fully dressed, because I was too terrified to change into pajamas anymore. I was staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Then the temperature dropped. It wasn't gradual, it was instant. The air went freezing cold, so sharp it hurt my nose to inhale. I squeezed my eyes shut. "I'm sorry, Marianne," I whispered, my mantra of guilt. Something grabbed my ankles. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a vice grip, strong and painful, like two bands of steel clamping down on my bones. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I tried to kick, but my legs wouldn't move. With a violent jerk, I was ripped down the mattress. I screamed. I clawed at the sheets, desperate for purchase, but the fabric just bunched in my hands. I was dragged off the foot of the bed, my hips slamming hard on the hardwood floor. The grip didn't let go. I was being pulled across the floor of the bedroom toward the open closet door. The closet was a gaping maw of darkness. "Marianne, stop! Please!" I shrieked. I grabbed the leg of the heavy oak dresser as I slid past. The friction burned my palms, but I held on. The force pulling my legs was immense, threatening to dislocate my hips. I was sobbing, hysterical. kicking wildly with my feet against empty air. Suddenly, the grip vanished. I didn't wait. I scrambled up, scrambled into the corner of the room, and curled into a ball, hyperventilating. I stayed there until dawn broke, watching the closet, waiting for her to come back and finish me. I looked at my ankles in the morning light. There were bruises, distinct, finger-shaped bruises, but they weren't the size of Mariana's hands. Mariana had small, delicate hands. These marks were large. The fingers were too long. A cold realization settled in my gut. That wasn't Mariana. Mariana had a temper, yes. She could be fiery. She was never cruel. She would never hurt me physically. She loved me. Even in our worst moments, she loved me. Whatever was in my apartment, whatever was dragging me toward the dark, wasn't the woman I loved. It was something else. Something that fed on misery. And I was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I was terrified to go back to the apartment, but I had nowhere else to go. I spent the day walking around the city, freezing in the November wind, dreading the sunset. That evening, as I approached the front steps of my building, I saw something sitting near the communal trash cans. It was a cat. It wasn't scrounging for food, or it wasn't fleeing from the noise of the street. It was sitting perfectly still, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws, watching me. It was a calico, mostly white with patches of orange and black. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The cat stood up and let out a soft murr sound. It walked right up to me, winding through my legs, rubbing its cheek against my shins. I reached down automatically to pet it. The fur was soft, surprisingly clean for a stray. Then the cat looked up at me. The breath caught in my throat. The eyes, they were blue. Not the greenish yellow or amber typical of cats. They were a deep, striking, impossible electric blue. They were her eyes. I fell to my knees on the sidewalk, ignoring the cold concrete. I stared at the cat, and the cat stared back, with an intelligence that felt jarring. It bumped its forehead against my nose, purring, a sound like a small engine. "Hey," I whispered, my voice trembling. The cat didn't run away. When I stood up and unlocked the front door of the building, the cat trotted inside ahead of me as if it owned the place. I hesitated, then followed. It climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment door and sat there, waiting for me to turn the key.
I opened the door. Usually the dread would hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. The heavy, malicious atmosphere. The cat walked in first. It strutted into the center of the living room, sat down, and let out a long, low hiss. It wasn't hissing at me. It was staring at the dark hallway leading to the bedroom. The fur along its spine stood up in a rigid ridge. I stood by the door, paralyzed. The cat held its ground. It let out a growl that sounded too deep for its small body. Then it strode forward, into the hallway, into the bedroom. I heard a thump, like something heavy falling, and then silence. The cat came trotting back out a moment later, its tail held high, looking relaxed. It walked over to the couch, Marianne's favorite spot, jumped up, curled into a ball, and went to sleep. For the first time in a month, the apartment felt empty, but in a good way. The heavy pressure was gone. I didn't kick the cat out. I named her Marianne. It felt sacrilegious to anyone else, I'm sure, but it felt like the only option to me. things changed after Marianne the cat moved in. The supernatural activity didn't stop immediately, but it changed. It felt like a war was being waged, but I was no longer the soldier. I was the civilian being protected. One night, I was watching TV. The air grew cold again. The familiar scent of ozone and rot began to creep in. I tensed up, clutching a pillow. Marianne, who had been dozing on my lap, instantly woke up. She leapt off the couch and stood in the center of the room. She stared at an empty corner near the ceiling, her ears pinned back flat against her skull. She let out a scream, that specific yowling caterwaul that cats make when they are about to fight. The lights flickered, the TV turned itself off. Marianne launched herself at the wall. She literally ran halfway up the drywall, claws out, swiping at the empty air. I saw, and I swear this is true, a dark, misty shape recoil from her. She landed on her feet and hissed again, spitting, her blue eyes blazing. The cold air dissipated instantly. The TV flickered back on. Marianne sat down, licked her paw, and looked at me as if to say, "It's handled." This happened a few more times over the next month. Whatever that thing was, whatever dark parasite had latched onto my grief, it was trying to come back. And every time, Marianne was there. She was a sentinel. She slept on the pillow next to my head every single night. If I shifted in a nightmare, she would place a paw on my cheek, grounding me. I started to notice things about her behavior, things that made the hairs on my arms stand up.
My human girlfriend, Marianne, had a very specific hate for olives. If a pizza came with olives, she would pick them off with surgical precision and stack them in a pyramid on a napkin. One night, I ordered a supreme pizza. I was eating at the coffee table. The cat jumped up. She sniffed a slice. She delicately used her claw to hook an olive, fling it off the pizza onto the table, and then nudged it away with her nose. She did this to every olive on the slice before trying to steal a piece of the pepperoni. I just stared at her. "Really?" I asked. She blinked slowly. Marianne, the human, also had a habit of tapping her fingers when she was impatient. The cat, when waiting for me to fill the food bowl, would tap her left paw rhythmically against the floor tiles. Tap, tap, tap. She didn't like cat toys. I bought feathers, laser pointers, fake mice. She looked at them with disdain. But she loved watching reality TV. She would sit on the back of the couch, eyes glued to the screen, head moving back and forth as the people argued. Human Marianne used to say it was her trashy, guilty pleasure. Slowly, the fear in my life evaporated. The dark entity gave up. It couldn't get past the guard dog, or rather, the guard cat. By the time spring arrived, the apartment was just an apartment again. But I was never alone. I talked to her. I know that's what crazy cat ladies do, but this was different. I told her about my day. I told her I was sorry about the fight. I told her I loved her. Whenever I apologized for the accident, for the argument, she would butt her head against my mouth to silence me. She would purr so loudly, it rattled her ribs. It was forgiveness. I knew it. Life went on. I moved out of that apartment 2 years later. Marianne came with me, obviously. I went back to school. I got a degree. I started a career in graphic design. I dated a few people, though it never really worked out. It's hard to bring someone home when you feel like your dead ex is judging them from the top of the cat tree. And that brings us to today. I was sitting on my porch this morning drinking coffee. Marianne was sunning herself on the railing. I realized the date, October 14th. It has been exactly 15 years since the accident.
It has been 15 years minus 3 weeks since I found the cat. I looked at her.
15 years is a long time for a cat. A cat at 15 is usually slowing down. They have gray hairs around their muzzle. Their eyes get cloudy with cataracts. They sleep 20 hours a day. They have trouble jumping onto high surfaces. Mary Ann looks exactly the same as the day I found her. I mean, exactly. Her fur is pristine, silky, and vibrant. There is not a single white hair on her black and orange patches. Her eyes are that same crystal, piercing electric blue, clear as a summer sky. She jumped from the porch railing to the roof of the garage this morning, a 6-foot vertical leap to chase a squirrel. She moves with the agility of a kitten. She eats with the appetite of a lion. I took her to the vet last week for a checkup. The vet, a new guy, looked at her chart. "Born roughly 15 years ago?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said. "I found her then." He examined her. He checked her teeth, her heart, her joints. He looked perplexed. He took an X-ray just to check for arthritis. "This is bizarre," he told me, showing me the scan. "Her bone density, her teeth. If you didn't tell me she was 15, I'd say this cat is maybe 2 years old, maximum. There's zero sign of aging, absolutely none." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. I came home and looked at old photos. I found a picture of human Mary Ann from her 20th birthday. She's laughing, looking at the camera. The look in her eyes is defiance and joy mixed together. Then I looked at the cat, sitting on my desk, watching me write this. I don't think she's a cat. I mean, she is a cat, biologically, I suppose. But the spirit inside? The thing looking out through those blue eyes? The entity that attacked me 15 years ago wanted to hurt me. It was drawn to my guilt. But Mary Ann, she fought it off. She came back. She found a vessel that would let her stay. I've read about this kind of thing. Reincarnation, possession, spiritual attachment. Usually spirits move on. They fade. Or if they stay in an animal, the animal eventually ages and dies. But she isn't aging. She isn't leaving. I stroked her head a few minutes ago, running my thumb over her ears. I whispered, "You're not going anywhere, are you?" She let out a short, sharp meow. It sounded like no. She bit my thumb gently, another thing human Marianne used to do when she was being playful, and began to lick my hand with her sandpaper tongue. I'm not scared. I should be, probably. It defies every law of nature. I'm living with a creature that is effectively immortal, inhabited by my dead girlfriend who refuses to cross over because she thinks I can't handle myself alone. And the honest truth, she's probably right. She's looking at me right now. She wants me to stop typing. She's tapping her left paw on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. I guess I better go. She hates to be ignored.